and I could see within his eyes that he was there to stay. He was faithful as a brother, he was faithful as a friend, looking for a lasting city, faithful to the end. Even when the road grew rugged and the sky turned black, trusting in his King, he had no thought of turning back. In the midst of persecution, with his dying breath, magnified the one who kept him faithful unto death. He was faithful as a brother, he was faithful as a friend, looking for a lasting city, faithful to the end, looking for a lasting city, faithful to the end. As I traveled on my journey, few and far between, were the pilgrims I found faithful to
Welcome to Plain Talk about Life in the Bible. I'm glad you could tune in once again. I want to say hello to Sasha. She's been very faithful now to call me and comment on these things. And I want to start by thinking about something Sasha said to me. She called me the other day, and she's my daughter, and she said, "You know, Dad, I think I'm getting this right." She said, "It really isn't about me." And I said, "Yes," and I'd mentioned this before, and we had another talk about it. It isn't about her, it's about Christ and his history, and she just happens to be part of it. And then she said to me, "Well, you know, all of my friends who really don't believe in much of anything are also, excited about tomorrow and about the future." And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "I'm trying to understand why they don't just kill themselves." And I said, "Yeah, that seems more rational." Now, it's not rational to kill yourself, but it is if you really understood how the world works, you would be a little more sorrowful, a little bit less excited about waking up tomorrow than you probably are, because it really is vanity. And that's the theme of this week's program and probably next week's, which is our hero, Pilgrim, has gone into a place called Vanity Fair, a very famous place. If anybody knows anything about Pilgrim's Progress, they usually will say, like if I'm at dinner and we're talking about it in Chicago, somebody will say, "Oh, Vanity Fair." That's the one thing they remember. They usually don't know anything else about it, but they remember that phrase. It comes from Pilgrim's Progress. Well, we'll take a closer look at it because it really is talking about the state of this world being Vanity Fair. The world that you and I live in, the world that you and I love, the world that you and I have pinned our hopes on is Vanity Fair in Bunyan's eyes. So we'll see if he's correct. Now, I wanted to start with this. Two difficult things. And I had mentioned this one time before. A very famous man, to me famous, a man named Thomas Watson, lived in the 1650s in England. Brilliant man. Just a pastor, but a brilliant man. He said there's two things that I find difficult to do. One, I have to make godly people happy. Two, I have to make ungodly people unhappy. Now that to me is profound. I hope it is to you. Think about it a minute. He has trouble making godly people happy. It comes to me all the time that people, godly people, what I mean by godly people is people who I believe truly are Christ's, who really do have faith in Christ's death, burial, and resurrection, who do follow Christ's commands to the best of their abilities. Certainly I'm not somebody who thinks you're going to keep his commands perfectly, because I know I don't. I don't keep them, I keep them not only imperfectly, I do it steadily, and so do you. So don't let me fall into that kind of a, thinking that somehow you and I, our service is anything that has any merit to it, because it doesn't. It has nothing but demerits to it. Still doesn't mean it's not good service in the Father's eyes. That's all. He sees with the Father's eyes. Everything has to be covered by grace, and my good works do, and so do yours. But making the godly happy, mostly it comes like this. People will call and say, I'm so disappointed, or I'm this or that. And I know that feeling. The things in this world, good news and bad news, hopeful things, they all get jumbled up, and we're not really sure where we stand at any moment. Now, the reason for that is easily explained. One, God doesn't want you to be comfortable in this world. You weren't made for this world. This world is such a temporary place. It's like going through a Greyhound bus station on your way to Cleveland. You're going to Cleveland. You're just in the bus station a minute. If you find somebody at the bus station who calls that home, you move down a few seats from them. You don't want to sit right next to that fool. Now, that's really how I feel about people who make this world home. I was at dinner the other night with my friend Jimmy Dinos in Chicago, and we were sitting in a place called, it just has a lounge on the front of it, kind of think of it. I don't really know the name of the place. And we got to talking about this idea, and Jimmy was just getting ready to go to Costa Rica for the weekend and go to the rainforest with his children and do all those things. But when he really got to thinking about it, he's very astute, and he just said, this is all sort of like you said, a grasping for the wind, isn't it? And I said, well, it isn't a grasping for the wind. I didn't say that. It is a grasping for the wind, but it came from the writer of Ecclesiastes. So you need to understand it's biblical wisdom. It's all vanity. There's nothing wrong with going to Costa Rica for the rainforest on the weekend. But if you think that's real life, somebody sold you a bill of goods. It may be all that you can expect in this life, and it may be the very dream that most of you have in this life, but it's a waste of life. It's like going to the lounge at American Airlines. I mean, it's better to go to the presidential lounge at American Airlines if you have to wait than to sit in the common areas. But it's a stupid airline waiting room. So they bring you a drink and they give you a hamburger. Big deal. It's still just an airport. It's not your destination. And that's kind of how I feel about this life. It's kind of lost its luster for me. I'm not very good at it, I'll tell you that up front. Never have been, don't intend to get better in the future at it. But I want to get better at passing through it, because it isn't my home, and I don't want you to settle on it being your home. So think about that. If you're a godly person, somebody who's really a follower of Christ, why would a man have trouble making you happy? I'll tell you why. Ecclesiastes 7:14 says something to the effect that God makes the day of adversity and the day of prosperity. And you've forgotten that. God makes the day of adversity as well as the day of prosperity. So you should rejoice when God gives you good weather and fine tailwinds. But when the storm comes, God also is the author of that. Now that should calm us. And I understand I don't take it calmly all the time either. But it should, if I had any sense, I would. If I had any sense, I really would. Now, I want to go to the second one, which is making ungodly unhappy. Sasha's right. There's no harder group to deal with than ungodly people. Somehow they're eternally optimistic about everything. I said to John today, he's a real optimist. I try to put on this microphone. We're on show 80-something. I've never put the microphone on right by myself in 80 tries. John handed it to me today, and he was just certain today would be the day I would do it right. Now, I actually got it backwards again today. So John will be just as optimistic the next time we shoot these shows. That's his nature. But it really shouldn't happen. John should just finally throw up his hands and decide that I'm a moron and that I can't do it right. And he's just going to have to treat me like I'm 5 years old, because that's the kind of treatment I need when I'm putting on a microphone. So I say that because I do appreciate optimism, and ungodly people in this world are as optimistic as John is about my microphone. Tomorrow's always going to be the last day of trial. Tomorrow's going to be the day of prosperity where they get all the money they've ever wanted. Even if you point out to them that money's never made anybody happy, as Franklin said, it's never made anybody happy. Nor will it. And those people who love silver are never satisfied with silver, and it creates a vacuum rather than filling one. Everybody will say, okay, yeah, that's wise. That's Ben Franklin. And I say, well, the writer of Ecclesiastes goes one further and just says, you just won't find a single person who loves silver who's satisfied with it. Okay, it's all vanity. Yeah, what are you going to do tomorrow? I'm going to chase the silver. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to spend my whole life doing it because if I ever get it, I'll really be happy. You're like, wow, what kind of thinking? It used to really bother me, and apparently it really bothered Sasha, until I remembered something that Mark Twain said one time. He said, look, when you look at mankind, you just have to realize they're all madmen. Then the mystery's solved. You see, if you understand that we're all madmen, then you realize, well, no wonder we do numbskull things. No wonder we do stupid things and follow foolish paths. We're madmen. And then this morning I was looking in Ecclesiastes. There's a passage where he says exactly the same thing, where the writer of Ecclesiastes says, well, it's like this. There's madness in our hearts. Just madness in our hearts. So that's what's wrong and why it's difficult to deal with ungodly people. They really do think that this is going to go on forever. You can explain to them that I have never seen a guy who lived forever. All the guys I know seem to die. I've gone to their funerals. I know, but I'm going to live another 20 years. Big deal. What is 20 years? What is 200 years? You could live 200 more years. Is that a big deal? That is not a big deal to me. Your back aches, your feet are sore, your knees throb, you can't hear out of your left ear, and when you hear out of your right ear, you can't tell which direction somebody's speaking from. That sounds like a lot of fun. I'd like for that to continue and kind of, disintegrate my capabilities over the next couple of 100 years. I'm sure that'd be really fun. So I said to you once before, my father's in his 80s now, and he's a knothead. He's always been a knothead. You could hardly find a guy who's run harder to do consistently wicked than my father, and I hope he's watching this one day. I'll certainly send it to him. I plead with him all the time to think about his soul, but he doesn't have time for that. He's just had his 4th bypass, and he's had 4 strokes, but he's just sure he's got another 20 years, so he's going to wait 19 and a half years before he worries about his soul. Okay, now you might want to live next door to that old nut, but I don't want to talk to him any more than I have to, except about these things, and I never make any headway. Why? He's crazy. We're all crazy. He's a madman. That doesn't make any sense, does it? He's in his 80s. Think about what I said to you. He says to me, I think I've got another 20 years now. Now, he can't go to the bathroom easily by himself. No problem, though. He'll want that for 20 years. And he's going to wait 19 and a half years to think about where he's going to spend the next billion years. Yeah, that guy, I'm sure he'd be full of good advice for you, too, if you were his neighbor. I think not. Now, Pop, if you're listening, I'm trying to get through to you that there's some kind of thickness about you that I can't cut with a knife, but if I could, I'd take the top of it off and scalp you. I mean, I just want you to get this idea that you probably won't live till next Friday. And I'm the only one who cares about your soul. I wish you did. But since you don't, I will. Why? Well, I love you. That's all. I don't know why I do even, because it isn't easy to love knotheads, especially when they've done nothing but wicked. One crime spree, it seems like your whole life's a crime spree. But nevertheless, I'm the one guy who cares. So maybe you'll call me tomorrow and you'll care. We'll see. But it's very hard to make an ungodly person unhappy. My father, you are case in point.